Hello Bookfighters, it is Thursday, February 9th. I am Katie, and today we are still talking about The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. But before we get to that, I would like to address a particular point, that it is Thursday, and I haven't heard anything from Kalinda, and she definitely did not post a video yesterday, which says to me that it is time for her first punishment. So, viewers, suggest a punishment down in the comments. There will also be a section for you to do that on the Squidulins, link in the underbar, and Bookfighters, maybe you should start coming up with punishments as well, because Kalinda definitely has this one coming. Daniel, the way that you diametrically disagree with all of the other Bookfighters on everything we ever do together is getting to the point where it's just sort of funny. Like, whatever opinion the rest of us have, particularly Sarah and I, you will have the opposite opinion. Always. Without fail. And it's getting to the point where it's just silly. Though I do agree with Daniel and also with what a few people said in comments, I don't think that The Fault in Our Stars is perfect. But I don't really feel like any book is perfect. So, you know, I don't know how valid that is as a criticism to say, well, it's not perfect. It's like, okay, but neither is The Fellowship of the Rings, and that doesn't stop me loving it any less. I feel like the biggest flaw in the book, and I think Dan sort of touched on it in his video, is the character of Peter Van Houten. He was just sort of cartoonish. I sort of get where they were going with the character, but he came off as false, as like a caricature, but not like a real person. And I want to believe that that was intentionally done, given the way that everything is kind of intentionally done in a John Green novel. And I don't feel like he would miss the fact that this is not coming off as a real person. So I want to believe that's intentional, but in reading it, it did take me out of the story just a little bit. And the character of Hazel, this is another minor criticism that I have for the book, is she did get a touch, just a touch, Mary Sue-ish here and there. I wouldn't say that her character is a Mary Sue, but there were times where I was like, this is just ever so slightly crossing over into Mary Sue land. But again, not enough for me to dislike the character or dislike the story, just enough for me to notice it. And Lauren, I actually had a similar experience as you did in the actual reading of the book itself. I was reading it when I was coming back home from Colorado, and what was interesting is that when I got to the point where their airplane was taking off, my airplane was taking off, and when I got to the point where their airplane was landing, my airplane was landing. So it was just sort of funny the way that it fit in rather nicely with what I was doing in life at the time that I was reading it. I did really like the character of Augustus Waters. I think I liked him more than I liked Hazel while I was reading it, just because I sort of identified with him a little bit more. Now the point in my Moby Dick video several weeks ago that I wanted to compare The Fault in Our Stars and Moby Dick, I feel a little bit like Augustus Waters and Ishmael are sort of similar in that they both see the symbolic value of everything that they do. That was the point that I wanted to compare when I was talking about the two Ishmaels and the Spouter Inn and the coffin dude. Both Ishmael and Augustus Waters see the symbolic resonance of all of their actions and sort of make decisions based on that symbolic resonance. I think part of why this story hits so strongly with me is, especially with Augustus Waters, is when he has moments like the existentially fraught basketball game. And I had just experienced an existentially fraught visit to my childhood home. And so I could really sort of identify with the themes sort of instantly. I was already in that zone, and maybe that's part of why I love this book as much as I do. Maybe if I read it in 6 months from now, it won't seem as poignant and relevant. I doubt it. I mean, it was still a wonderful book, but I suppose that's a possibility if you're coming from a completely different point in your life, that it will not seem as strong to you. Though, once again, I'm not someone that loved looking for Alaska, and it seems sort of like the way in which this whole pro-TFiOS or or against TFiOS opinions come from tend to be the people who Looking for Alaska was their favorite John Green novel aren't really loving The Fault in Our Stars, whereas the people who like Paper Towns or one of his other books were their favorite novels, they are loving The Fault in Our Stars. I don't really get the deep love for Looking for Alaska. It never stood out for me when I read the book. It's never one that I felt like, oh man, I really need to read Looking for Alaska again. I wasn't like deeply emotionally moved. I didn't really connect with the story at all. It seemed maudlin and an old story, really. It didn't seem fresh to me. And not to say it was a bad book. It wasn't at all. It was definitely worth reading once, but it never made it into my favorites. And that seems to be the dividing line with The Fault in Our Stars. So I'm sort of curious, with the other Bookfighters and with the viewers as well, was Looking for Alaska your favorite John Green novel? And if it was, why was it? And which side do you come down on? Is The Fault in Our Stars one of his best books or not? So that's my question for the Bookfighters and the commenters today. Okay, Bookfighters, that is all that I have for you this week. I'm looking forward to hear some of your more in-depth ideas, so hopefully we can have a better discussion going by next week. Also, viewers, I would love to hear from you. Just a reminder, if you do a video response to any of our videos, obviously we'll talk about it on the channel, but I'm also posting them on the Squidoo lens for this month. If you did look at the January lens, the one for Moby Dick, and was like, this kind of sucks, take a look at the February one, because I'm doing the layout a little bit different and it's a little less messy, easier to navigate, that sort of thing. So I would check that one out. Those links are all in the bookshelf, so check that out, and Julia, I will see you tomorrow.